And it looks like that's it, I think. Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So full-time goes at London Stadium. That is it. Villa survive.
Thank you, Pinky, for seeing us through the last couple of minutes there. That is it, as Pinky says. Aston Villa have saved their Premier League status. A 1-1 draw here this afternoon this afternoon in Stratford at the London Olympic Stadium is good enough to keep Villa in the Premier League. Watford I think the game's still going. They're 3-2 down at Arsenal. They will be going down. And Bournemouth, who have done everything they needed to do today, they went to Everton. They're 3-1 up. But unfortunately for the Cherries, it's not in their hands. And 2 goals within the space of about 60 seconds, one for each team, one for Jack Grealish and another for Jack Grealish a few moments later means Villa are the team who are going to stay up. That's the end of the season, gentlemen. It's finished. I know it's a bit early to kind of look back at the whole thing, but Rio, your immediate thoughts upon the climax of this year and today's game?
Probably the both have got the same comment attached to them. Thank God that's over. In terms of today's game, how can I put it? Slow, stodgy, inept, lackadaisical, dull. As in terms of the season, it promised much, delivered little in time of the West Ham tradition. We've assembled the most expensive squad ever, full of attacking intent, full of promise. We got unhinged by a rather unfortunate injury to our main goalkeeper, and we derailed ourselves. And it took a worldwide pandemic and a bit of a break to kind of regroup, get organised, and trigger survival. Congratulations to David Moyes. He's bought very well in the January window. He's bought 2 key players who have really galvanised us and offered exactly what was lacking: work rate, effort and ability. But he's also made Michael Antonio into a target man and almost a striker. He still lacks that last deadly finishing touch, but you can't argue that. Was it 8 goals in the last 19 games? Mm-hmm. Can't argue with that. And we saw what he did with Marko Arnautovic. He's had a very similar effect on Antonio towards the end of the season, and it's kept us up, kept us safe. We're going back to Premier League grounds next year.
We are, and so are Aston Villa. Everyone, I suppose, reasonably pleased at the London Stadium this afternoon. Villa, the visitors, more so than West Ham, because their very future was right up in the air until the last few seconds of the game, really, until,
Well, I mean, it's clear, actually. We're seeing the scenes now from the television company. The Aston Villa players at full time clearly weren't aware of what the position was, because there's been 2 minutes since the final whistle's gone, and for some reason they've been under the impression that they weren't safe, and maybe they were just waiting to see whether or not Watford could bang in 3 in 2 minutes at the Emirates. So they've clearly waited until the official confirmations come through and that the Watford game is finished. So they held off celebrating. But for my money here today, I mean, Aston Villa have got incredibly lucky. They've got lucky because they were playing against a West Ham United team that were already at the airport, and with a couple of players that came off the bench that frankly will be at other clubs next season. So, they will say they can only beat what's in front of them, but they couldn't even do that today. Yeah, they've drawn a game against a team that weren't interested, and that tells us really about what Aston Villa are. They're a poor team. What I would actually just caution that with a little bit, Aston Villa are a poor team, and we've finished 4 points ahead of them. So let's not kid ourselves. This has been an absolutely appalling season for West Ham United. We've seen very little to set the pulse racing. The whole thing about the disjointed season, yes, it's not been ideal, but it's probably worked in our favour. But how on earth have we yet again got ourselves into a position where there were a couple of games to go, we could have been facing the drop? And for my money now, we've finished 4 points ahead of Villa, and they chucked 134 million quid at it last summer.
Mm-hmm.
We chucked rather less at it. I suspect Villa will chuck more at it this summer than we'll chuck at it. And it does worry me that whether or not the chairman has got this idea that we've got a good enough squad, we've got good enough players, because clearly we haven't. You know, we're 5 points off the drop zone after 38 matches.
Yeah.
And it really isn't good enough. We need a lot of investment. We need in key areas of the park. You know, the fullback situation I'm not happy with. The striker situation I'm definitely not happy with. And we've got a number of players facing the tail end of their careers. Mark Noble at 33.
Mm-hmm.
Even Antonio, last year of his contract, and he's 31 now, I think. You know, stick or twist, what do you do with him? So we're in all sorts of bother as a football club. Aston Villa, they'll be stronger next year. My doubt is that we will. And that's a worry to me.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your quick roundups there. West Ham started the day 15th in the Premier League. We end it in 16th because Brighton have, quite unexpectedly, I suppose, gone to Burnley and pulled off a 2-1 win. Brighton, they seem destined for the drop. They couldn't buy a win, could they, until Project Restart? They hadn't won in 2020. 3 months off, they come back, they're revitalised, they're a different team, and they've ended up on 41 points somehow. So no doubt they will be delighted with the way that's panned out. Just a quick run through the scores in the Premier League today and confirmation of the final positions. Chelsea 2, Wolves 0. Chelsea finished 4th and in the Champions League. The other Champions League spot is decided at the King Power Stadium. Leicester City 0, Manchester United 2. Leicester City finishing 5th and Manchester United going into the Champions League in 3rd place. I'm sure they'll be delighted about that. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will be no doubt delighted given the stick he was given at the start of the season. Southampton 3, Sheffield United 1. Disappointing into the season for Sheffield United, who have been pretty fabulous, let's be fair. But Southampton, what a great second half of the season they've had. I mean, another team that was in trouble earlier in the season, and they've played very, very well. And they've actually played some decent football as well with the wins. Liverpool ending up winning 3-1 at Newcastle on the final day. We've said, we've already talked about Burnley, Brighton, West Ham and Villa. We know, of course, it's ended 1-1 here. Watford 3-0 down after 30 minutes against Arsenal. They got it back to 3-2. That's how it's finished there. So they are relegated. Manchester City beat bottom side Norwich City 5-0 this afternoon. Crystal Palace and Tottenham ends up as a 1-1 draw. And Bournemouth winning 3-1 at Everton to sign off with a win. What now for Eddie Howe? We shall see what happens. But of course, closer to home, as Pinky has alluded to, what now for a number of players at West Ham United? What now for someone like Sebastian Haller? Will he still be here next year? What now for Felipe Anderson, who came on today, the first time we've seen him for a few games, but clearly not part of the plans of David Moyes, or at least doesn't seem to be part of David Moyes' plans. And then there's people like Lanzini. Again, we saw a brief cameo this afternoon, but he's not been involved. Rio, are you in agreement that what we've seen in terms of the players that Moyes has used in recent weeks would generally mean that's the ones he wants to keep? So the likes of Haller, the likes of Lanzini, the likes of Anderson not being used means that they're probably going to be on the way out this summer.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I still think there could be a future for Haller.
Yeah.
But I think that's because of the dearth of attacking options we have. We've taken him away. He obviously doesn't fancy a jetty in any kind of way, shape or form. Unless we bring in 2 or 3 to replace Haller with the money available from his potential sale, he's got a role to play. Anderson, his first season here was enjoyable to watch. He produced moments of genuine quality and sheer joy at times. But he looks like a completely different player this season. Yep. And even in that brief cameo there, he was pretty anonymous. He didn't hardly break into a jog, let alone anything else.
Yep.
So I think he's probably the first for the exit door. He's probably got the biggest price tag. We can reinvest, hopefully, utilising that money. I think we'll get half of what we pay for him back. But yeah, I think the players he's used are going to be the spine of next season's team. But as Pinky pointed out, the whole spine of that particular set of players is ageing in every single department. He mentioned Antonio will be 31 next season, Noble 33, Ogbonna's going to 32, Fabianski 34. That's the spine of your side.
Yeah.
And two of them have been brightest sparks in a pretty dull season. So that's a major worry. There's a lot of reinvestment needed. A lot of recruitment has to be made, and it has to be spot on. Do I trust our ownership to actually get that right? That's a different matter.
Yes.
But we've got to carry on in the frame of mind we did the January window. We brought in two great players in Bowen and Souček. That's what we've got to be after. Not expensive show ponies who really contribute little and don't particularly want to be here.
Great stuff. Thanks, Rio. Pinky, put yourself in David Moyes' shoes now. Season's over. That's it. It has, as you said, been a pretty awful season. Let's be honest. For West Ham United, we've barely finished above the... Excuse me. I felt that one coming. We've barely finished above the relegation. So as you said, only 4 or 5. Was it 4 or 5 points above Aston Villa, who, of course, were promoted and have been in the relegation zone pretty much all season. 4 points. 36, interestingly, 36 would have been enough to keep us up. 35, in fact, with our goal difference. But West Ham have finished on 39 points. Pinky, if you were in David Moyes' shoes, what are your first jobs next week in terms of changing your squad? Who goes, who comes in?
Well,
more really, who goes, I think, first of all. We could...
Yeah, I think first off, looking at our results, 10 wins this season.
Yeah.
Half of which have come against relegated teams. So who have we been beating? And we've been flat track bullies against, Norwich City, Watford, and Bournemouth. So and that's quite unusual for us. Normally, they're the teams that we'd actually trip up against. But it's indicative of our own lack of quality, that we're good enough to beat the absolute rubbish. But anyone that actually puts up a modicum of a fight, I'm thinking the likes of an Everton or a Southampton or a Burnley, we're coming up short. And so if we say what's a realistic objective for next season, we want to be in the top half. We want to be aiming at 8th or 9th as a realistic step. So looking at that, you're looking at needing to get another 15 points, maybe 20 points, which means the players and the playing personnel have got to change significantly. And I think he's probably looking at needing 4 first-team players coming in. For my money, the ones to go, because players are going to have to go to raise the funds.
Yep.
Felipe Anderson can go for my money. And I think Rio's being optimistic in terms of us getting half the money back. I think Yarmolenko can go for my money because I think we can bring young Dean Garner back from West Brom, and I'd rather give youth a chance. And I know there's rumours of a bid, wasn't there, or an interest from Celtic at about £13 million from Dean Garner.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I'd be selling him for that money at this stage. So, but Yarmo and Anderson to go. A surprise one coming up if you're here now. Issa Diop, I'd look to trade. He isn't ugly enough. He isn't nasty enough. He doesn't go in where it hurts enough. And I know full well in 3 years' time, he'll be a smashing centre-back. But do you know what? There's a lot of games to play in the next 3 years. And he's an asset that another club might be willing to invest 3 years in to reap the rewards 3 years down the line.
Yeah.
Sad to say, because of the financial predicament we're always in, he might be one that we could get above book value on raise some reasonable funds on. So he'd be one I'd look to trade. Fredericks, I might retain, but not as a first pick. You know, I think the whole world can see what his deficiencies are, and the fact that we didn't pay a transfer fee for him would suggest that we'd be lucky to get one for him if we tried to move him on. Beyond that, you know, Jack Wilshere, thank you very much, Jack, but not at this club anymore. If I could trade him, I'd shift Lanzini, because again, for my money, he's not the player he was. And just looking through it, you know, what's that? Half a dozen of names so far.
Yep.
Yep. Another one.
Anderson, Yarmolenko, Diop, Johnson. Diop, Lanzini, Wilshere. Ayeti, would you add Ayeti to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's so bad. I assume he's already gone. I mean, I mean, you know, just clear your locker out, son, and get a new club later. Yeah. Masuaku, you know, so with the ones already gone, which is Sanchez and Zabaleta, you know, and you could argue Cresswell, maybe keep Cresswell as the backup left back, but not the first pick. We're probably looking at 8 players that are going to have to be signed. And where's the money coming from? Where's the money coming from? And this is why I keep going back to the thing on Sebastian Heller. I think there is a footballer in there. I do. And I think he could be a good player for us. But once again, we're coming up against the brick wall of no money. And we'll end up selling the players who we can sell rather than the players we want to get rid of. Because ultimately, who's going to command a fee? And I read the forum, as we all do, and I see some very fancy valuations being put on our players. Yeah. One thing experience tells us is we always think our players are worth more than they are, and we always underestimate how much other teams' players will cost us. You know, there's a value gap there that we're unable to bridge. So again, for my money, an awful lot of business needs to be done. The problem is they've got 6 weeks to do it in. 6 weeks really is what you're looking at. I know the transfer window goes on till October, but yeah, if you're still bringing in players on October the 4th, and you've maybe played 5 or 6 league games by then, depending on how the fixtures fall, you could be in the wrong third of the table before the transfer window shuts, and then you're chasing your tail all season, and we're back to square one. So I have to say, I'm a worried man because, you know, the table doesn't lie after 38 games. I think there's an awful lot of people blaming it on Roberto. But do you know what? I think the problems go much deeper than that. I really do. And I think against teams of genuine quality, they unpick us with ease. Difficult season ahead. A lot of trading to be done, you know. And I'm just looking at the squad here. Yeah, Fabianski is, as Rio said, he's getting a bit older now. David Martin was never ever a first pick keeper. Did very well in his moments of glory with the club. Pleased for him, but never ever going to be a first team starter. Darren Randolph, sorry, there's a reason we sold him originally. Winston Reid, still in Kansas. Cresswell, no, not for me. Balbrena, not for me. Zabaleta, gone. Ogbonna, very good. He's a keeper. Diop might have to sell because of funding issues. You know, I'm looking at it. You know, we basically need 4 defenders before we start looking anywhere else. I mean, you're David Moyes, you're going, how bad was I in another life to get this? You know, just shocking, shocking.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that in just a second, Rio. We'll just run through that list that's Pinky's made, and we'll see if we all sort of reach a consensus on that. Just one thing I wanted to touch on quickly, just to change tack very briefly. There were 2 teams in the Premier League this year who conceded more goals at home than they did away. Anyone want to take a wild stab in the dark at who they may be, Rio? You first.
It's got to be us, isn't it?
One of them is us, yeah. And the other?
I'd probably
putting you on the spot
go for Norwich. Has to be.
Norwich? Not Norwich. No, Norwich conceded 37 at home, 38 away. The only other team to concede more goals at home than they did away this season was the team who conceded 9 at home in one particular game, and that was Southampton. They scored. Southampton conceded 35 at home and 25 away, which is actually pretty damn fantastic when you consider Man City conceded 22 away and Chelsea conceded 38 away. So their away record was fantastic. But I mean, that's a real problem, is it? I mean, joking aside, it just shows that our home form has been particularly poor this season. And there's a whole another argument here that perhaps we can come back to on a mod pod about what the West Ham crowd brings to the team in terms of support. Because this isn't a new thing, is it? We've not performed well at this stadium since we moved here 4 years ago. I think that's probably a mod pod on its own, a whole episode to look at that. But I just thought that was interesting just to point that out. So, but anyway, let's go back to what Pinky was saying. Made some really interesting comments there, Rio, about the squad looking ahead to the summer. Some names we pulled out. Ayeti needs to go. Anderson got to go. Though, as Pinky says, he doesn't think we'll get half the 35 million back that we paid for him this summer. Yarmolenko, 17 million pounds. What are you going to get for a player like that who's barely fit? Diop, of course, is the one that perhaps controversially Pinky thinks would be the player to go that would realise a good transfer fee. Let's not forget this is a player who was linked with a 50 million plus pound move to Tottenham not so many months ago. So you could certainly get a player or two for that sort of money. Manny Lanzini, not the player he was, unfortunately, is he, at the moment? Jack Wilshere, dirty Jack Wilshere, £100,000 a week, so we're told he's on, and he just doesn't play. But the question is, of course, I suppose, who would buy him? Would someone like Slaven Bilic come in, or Leeds United? Or would they take a risk? And then Arthur Masuaku, a defender who, let's be honest, doesn't really defend particularly well, does he? Is there anyone there, Rio, that you would sort of say, you think's worth perhaps persevering with for another season? And is there anyone else that you would sort of add to that as players that need to go this summer?
I'd like to keep Yarmolenko.
Right. Okay.
But then again, I'm borderline insane having supported this club for 3 odd years. I just like his chaos factor. But we're in a massive rebuilding, as Pinky said. We're going to have to ship out players we don't want to because the investment just isn't there from our ownership. Current economic climate doesn't help. As you said, there's a whole different debate to this thing regarding the stadium move and the money we're supposed to generate from it to help us with a world-class side.
Mm-hmm.
We could go on about that for months, probably. Not just one episode. It'd probably be like a mini-series. In midfield, you've got to worry about the future of Declan Rice because he's probably the most sellable asset.
Yep.
Diop would be after that. But yeah, Declan Rice would probably come on the biggest fee, have the most suitors. I mean, there's not a lot that I'd strive to keep. I think you've summed it up perfectly. Lanzini would be 2 years ago, you would have kept him like a shot.
Sure.
His cameo today was probably his best performance since that injury.
Mm-hmm.
But he just hasn't performed well enough over the last 18 months to even kind of justify thinking about keeping him.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few players that I actually like at West Ham at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm fiercely defensive about my team, the players that represent it. But there's not a lot of love in the Rio household for a vast majority of them players. Yeah. And I'd gladly ship them out if we could rebuild and regroup with a set of players who are fully committed to the club, fully committed to put in genuine effort, have ability, have a purpose. A lot of our players are far too busy coasting through their career. We're on about, say, like Villa's players today been on the beach almost, and our players been on the beach. Our players have been like that for the large part since September. And we've seen a bit of a cultural shift under Moyes. The work rate's there, the effort's there, but we need more of that, much more of that. As I've said before, more graft, less craft, because craft is getting us nowhere.
Some excellent points. Thanks, Rio, for... So really, just looking back, the only one you're sort of slightly concerned about on top of that list is Declan Rice. Of course, this is someone we haven't spoken about much today. Been excellent, really, in the last few weeks. But he's the one I think that's the one that worries me. I kind of think, Pinky, you said that, pointed out that the transfer window is 7 or 8 weeks long, whatever it is, this season. It's very unusual situation. I think you kind of think perhaps the longer that transfer window goes on and we haven't been able to ship out the Andersons, the Yarmolenkos, the Wilsheres, the Lanzinis, and so on and so forth. I kind of worries me about a bid coming in from Chelsea, sort of a cheeky £45 million bid for Declan Rice, and kind of Moyes looking at that and thinking, well, Declan's a great player, but I can buy myself, 4 or 5 championship players to rebuild the squad out of that. So we shall wait and see. Of course, this is always the difficult thing, isn't it? Trying to offload the players you don't want. We all know who we don't want and who isn't going to help the squad. But of course, we need clubs to buy those, and that's always the real difficulty. We'll come back to that in a second, but just want to touch quickly on the comments, guys. If you're watching us on the stream, thanks to those that have joined us since the final whistle. Good to have you on the stream. Let us know what you thought about the game today, what you're thinking about the season, the sort of things we're talking about now. Rio, we're going to go to the KUMB before a match thread in just a moment after this, but just having a quick look, a couple of comments. Good to see Cockney Hammer on the stream. Thank you. Cockney Hammer says, look forward to this again next season. Of course, as we look forward to you joining us, Steve, and also all your updates. We're looking forward to those coming in throughout the summer of who West Ham are looking to buy and who they're not going to buy. Kieran James Devaney. Hi, Kieran. Again, we're coming back to this point. Villa have stayed up because of the point they stole against Sheffield. Pinky, we spoke about this earlier in the stream, and you said you didn't think anyone would challenge that. It's slightly different to how it was 12 years ago, and it's a valid point you make with the Tevez situation. But I don't know. I just wonder. And of course, I suppose the irony being that the man at both of these, Mr. Scott Duxbury, it was he who was at West Ham when Sheffield United tried to get us relegated because of Tevez. He is now there, the CEO at Watford, and Watford have been relegated because Villa won a point they didn't deserve against Sheffield United. I wonder how he's feeling tonight.
Yeah, I think karma. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not sure our club handled that situation as well as we could have done from the club's perspective. I mean, and that's putting aside the blood-sucking antics of Sheffield United. But I can't imagine the Premier League would thank any club chairman who resorted to litigation over this particular topic. And, let's not kid ourselves. It's an invitation league whereby you become a shareholder in the league when you get promoted, and you are obliged to surrender your share when you get relegated. It would be the mother of legal challenges, and you'd be challenging the Premier League, a multi-billion-pound organisation. I mean, there must be lawyers who are thinking, please let someone do it, because once the Amber Heard and who's that two-bob actor that's in court at the minute? What do you call him? Johnny Depp.
Depp, is it? Yeah.
Once that's out of the way, and that's easy money for the lawyers, they must be looking at, maybe football as the next big payday. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But for my money, I mean, looking at things here now, and again, just look down. I mean, here's a little stat for you. Felipe Anderson made more appearances for West Ham United this season than Michael Antonio. Now,
Wow.
Anderson already the forgotten man of the team, effectively.
Yeah.
And we're all saying out he goes, potentially. But it just goes to show how maybe a change of manager, a change of fortune, and the world can look very, very different. But a Jetty there, 3 appearances. What did he cost us? 6, 7, 8 million plus his wages.
Yeah.
He's a bad boy. Jack Wilshere, 6 appearances, I think, in total. Something of that nature. So Souček has already made more appearances this season than Wilshere.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at it, Carlos Sanchez, 4 appearances. So we've actually had, realistically, a first 13 or 14 this season. But we've got too many players that we just won't be able to shift easily. And I think the manager has got a horrific job. I'm not worried about Declan Rice. I think Rice will stay for at least one more season. And I think because of all the uncertainty in the world of the COVID situation, his advisors might be telling him there'll be better offers in a year's time than there are right now.
Yeah.
And I think David Sullivan would certainly be of that view. So Sullivan, I'm sure, will be bringing in young Declan and saying, Declan, I know you signed a long-term contract not so long ago.
Yeah.
We want you here as a volunteer, not as a conscript. So here's another chunk of change a week to keep you happy, to keep you motivated. And we'd like to sell you next summer, if you don't mind, rather than this summer. So I'm not worried about Rice going anywhere. And that's partially why I was leaning down this path of Diop as a savable asset, someone you'd actually get some money for. But, even, dare I say it, Antonio, 31. Let's just say somebody made a bid for Zaha at Crystal Palace and chucked a cheeky 50 million in their direction, which I think would be overpriced, by the way, but somebody could do.
Yeah,
I think Antonio would be exactly the sort of player that Palace would target. 31, looking for a final contract, probably. South London lad, all of those things. We might actually get a fee beyond which he's probably worth, if you get my drift there. But it really is a case of sell whoever the hell we can, because there's just so much needing doing. It's just absurd. But
I
challenge is, nah, I don't see it.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say that, sorry, that I think ideally, I mean, if you're looking to rotate your squad and keep your players fit and ensure you've got players of the right age in there. Antonio, I mean, I just had a look there. He was 30 in March, so he's going to be 31, getting on for 32 by the time next season ends, when his contract expires. Now, I guess the point is that the better sides would generally sell an Antonio right now, wouldn't they? He's the wrong side of 30, 1 more year on his contract. If he signs a new contract, he's going to be looking for big money, because we know it's going to be, if it's a 4-year deal, 3 or 4 year deal, it's going to be his last big proper Premier League contract. So he's not going to be signing on for 30 or 40 grand a week. He's going to want a considerable sum of money. So yeah, that's the one where, as I say, if you're a big club, you're looking at that, you're thinking you either sell him now and you rake in 10 to 15 million. I don't know if he's worth much more than that, maybe a little bit more. I don't know at this day and age. Or you keep him for the next season and you let him go on a free with a thank you for everything you've done for the club. Thanks for your services. But I think the point, just another point about Antonio, is prior to his recent purple patch, which began against Chelsea, he'd only scored in 2 games prior to that this season. The 3-2 defeat at home to Tottenham and the 3-1 win against Southampton. So, credit to David Moyes for bringing about that change. But yeah, I kind of agree with you, Pinky. I think, although he's been the man in the last few weeks, I think I would be looking to say, you know what, thank you for the last 3, 4, 5 years, but now's the time to move on to another player and see what we can do. But what do you guys think? Rio, Michail Antonio, let's do two things. There's another thing I wanted to touch on, so I'll ask you about both. But Declan Rice was the other one that Pinky's just spoken about. David Moyes said recently that he's told Declan that he wants to build a team around him. So the presumption of that is that Moyes will want to do his utmost to keep Rice this season. I kind of agree with Pinky. I don't think he'll necessarily go. But what do you do there? What are your thoughts on that? Antonio, should we offer him another contract this summer, or should we be saying, you've had your best years and we're going to move on? Moyes has talked about the Leipzig model, and this is obviously one of the things that they'd be looking to do, I guess, in that situation. Of course, Rice. Do you keep Rice, or do you cash in and rebuild? With the 50, 60 million you're going to get for him, Rio? What are your thoughts on those two?
Personally, I'd keep him. The first thing I'd do, I'd make him the club captain.
Declan Rice,
yeah.
This is, yeah.
Yeah, Declan Rice, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd make him the club captain. I'd tell him in no uncertain terms that we're going to recruit the players around him that he deserves to be playing alongside.
Yep.
He's a natural born leader, and that's something we've been lacking for a lot of this season. Apart from him, obviously only Mark Noble stands out, but he's towards the end of his career. His performances in the games previous to this might have earned him a bit more leeway and a bit more game time next season, but today he's dropped back 30 yards and he was woefully ineffective today.
Yeah.
Declan Rice is the focal point for this football club going forward. So he's the one you have to try and keep. My worry is that there's a European Championships next year. The following year, in quick succession, there's a World Cup. Now, Declan Rice is a good enough player to be England's first choice holding midfielder in both of those tournaments. And we all know that around international tournament times, if you're playing for the right club, you are more likely to represent your country and get game time than you are if you are playing at West Ham United. And that's my worry. We all know that Chelsea are desperate to get him, pair him up with his best mate. But we should really be looking to build our team around him. And as a club, it sends out a statement if we can hold on to him. So I think making him captain would be a massive step to not only make him feel wanted and welcome, but we have to recruit the right people around him to enable him to flourish and not be tempted by the suitors that are quite clearly hovering around trying to snap him up.
Okay.
In terms of Michail Antonio, the clever club would, as you say, cash in now. That goal spurt towards the end of this season has rocketed his value up by quite some margin, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
He's a versatile forward. He'd do a job for a large number of teams around us. Palace has been mentioned. I know they've been interested in the past. But he'd do an admirable job for all of those kind of clubs, even the leading clubs in the Championship.
Mm-hmm.
I know he obviously he's got the ambitions to play at a higher level, and rightly so. He's a determined guy. But a clever club would cash in now while he's the most sellable. Like we said, the age goes against him.
Yeah.
If Moyes is going to implement the Red Bull model, which I sincerely hope he does, that's what we should be striving for.
Okay.
Then, we should cash in. He's done amazingly well for us. Had a bit of a rocky start to his West Ham career. Couldn't force his way in the side, but ever since he has done, he's been a real key. And he's done a really good job, good value for money. But football, we've got to evolve. We can't keep relying on the players who are in their 30s to lead us into the future. We've got to look to the likes of Declan Rice to do that.
Great stuff. Thanks, Rio. A couple of comments from the chat, and on the things we've been discussing the last 10, 15 minutes or so. Trodge says, it's disgusting if we sell Antonio. We need more of his mentality, and it is infectious. The point, I guess, being, Trodge, that it's also going to be very costly if we decide to keep him beyond next season, because he's naturally out of contract in 12 months' time. And as we were saying there, it's going to be a big payday he's going to be looking forward to for one more big Premier League contract. And is it something, you know, we've had players, you know, you look at situations like Winston Reid, who we gave a 6-year deal to, who can't play anymore. Do we want to be in that situation when we've got another player who's 33, 34, like Antonio in 2 to 3 years' time, and, you know, a player we're paying an awful lot of money not to actually play. Interesting to hear your comments, though. Thanks, Trodge, for your thoughts on that. Obviously, nobody's right and wrong. It's good to hear everybody's opinions. A couple of more comments. Chris Dalby says, the best we get out of Rice is another season. No way he stays beyond that. I expect him to go this year, though. And Wacko Gov says, Antonio brings much more than just goals. His effort and personality on and off the pitch is irreplaceable. And Chris Dalby, again, says, nearly all the fans would expect Rice to be sold, so it would be okay in most of our eyes. Just one other comment that I wanted to bring up, something we were discussing earlier, talking about that point that Aston Villa got against Sheffield United, that they probably shouldn't. DL, who's not with us today, usually with us, but is having an afternoon off, says that the precedent has been set for legal action after a supposed unfair relegation, of course referring to West Ham and the Sheffield United and the Tevez affair back in 2008. And he says he hopes Watford and Bournemouth take the Premier League to the cleaners after the Hawkeye cock-up. We shall see what happens there. Pinky, Declan Rice. We want to keep him. David Moyes wants to keep him. But will we be able to keep him? Is it a question that if someone comes in and offers the sort of money that David Sullivan can't say no to, might that decision be taken out of David Moyes' hands?
Well, let's get something clear. David Sullivan can say no to anyone he likes because the player is under contract for another 4 years. You know, so let's be absolutely clear. When the chairman says I couldn't say no, yes, he could. Okay, so let's not have any of this. Oh, when a player wants to go, you know, and all the rest of it. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Declan's under contract first and foremost. Yeah, and we should not be selling our best players for peppercorn fees, you know, just because the chairman won't put more money into the club. You know, when the club was on a real rocky financial footing, Mr. Sullivan launched a rights issue and they put £30 million in. There's no rule against him putting another 30 and another 30 and another 30 in. It's just how much he wants to actually fund the club by in terms of his overall investment. And I think maybe the sign that Declan Rice will be looking for is, well, Mr. Chairman, when are you going to match my ambition? When are you going to say, do you know what? I'm going to put £100 million into West Ham United so I can give this manager a realistic transfer budget this time around. So Declan, give us 1 more year. Let me invest that chunk of money and see what this manager can do with a realistic budget. Because ultimately, Declan Rice will only want to go to another club because he'll look at where he is and go, are we ever going to win anything here? Probably not. So I'll go somewhere else and play with my mate. You know, he'll be well paid wherever he goes. If he goes to Chelsea, they'll pay him well. If he goes to Arsenal, they'll pay him well. If he goes to Tottenham, they'll pay him well. Man United will. And do you know what? West Ham United can afford to pay him well as well. So, you know, money isn't the issue here. It's whether or not the player feels his career is going to be advanced at the club he's at. And the only thing that actually would encourage the likes of Declan Rice to choose West Ham United is if they see realistic investments in players that can strengthen the team and say, do you know what? We're going to go from 16th up to 7th next season. And then the following season, we're going to invest again and try and break into those top positions. Because at the minute, what we're doing is we're giving every young, ambitious player a cop-out a get-out card, which is, yeah, if you want to win something, go to another club. We've got to remove that easy out for the players, because otherwise we'll go nowhere as a football club. I'm afraid the chairman won't want to hear it because he'll say, well, easy for Pink Palermo to spend my fortune that's taken me my whole life to earn. But if the chairman can't fund the club to a competitive level, well, maybe it is time to go. Maybe it is time to go. Maybe instead of Mr. Sullivan selling Declan Rice, maybe Mr. Sullivan should sell West Ham United Football Club. That's the solution. And I'm sorry if that sounds a bit negative, but at the end of the day, 2002, 3, whenever it was, the Chelsea players were told, if you don't qualify for the Champions League, the club's going bust. Because they've gambled everything on moving up the table. West Ham United, particularly in the last decade, I'm not sure we've invested enough. And I'm absolutely certain Mr. Sullivan hasn't invested enough and Mr. Gold hasn't invested enough. And this isn't being nasty or unpleasant towards those people. I'm sure they're very affable people and nice guys and all the rest of it. But this is a very, investment-hungry industry, if you can call it that. What you see year after year is the teams that invest season after season after season in their playing squads do advance up the league table. And the teams that sell and sell and sell season after season go into the Championship. And for my money, if you want to keep Declan Rice, buy 4 or 5 other top quality players and move up the league table. That's what the chairman should be talking to him about. Not, oh, will you hang around for another year, please, Dec, to give me some breathing space? No, if I was Declan Rice, I'd be going in to see Mr. Sullivan and saying, what are you going to do for West Ham United? What are you going to do for West Ham United? Who are you going to sign? Where's the money coming from? And if your only idea is to sell me to generate funds to buy half a dozen Championship players, well, maybe that's the reason I've got to go right now, Mr. Chairman, because that's the road to nowhere. And that, for me, is, David Sullivan's at the crossroads here now. If he wants to continue in his role at West Ham United, is put up time, spend some money, do another rights issue, get another 60, 70, 80 million out of the shareholders. And then I've got more sympathy if you sell Anissa Diop to raise some funds. Then I'd say, Felipe Anderson, you can go for whatever we can get, because then we've got a realistic kitty to go and buy 4 or 5 first-team starters, not 4 or 5 backups to a first team that's finished at the wrong end of the table again. And that's where I'd look at it.
Excellent stuff. Thanks, Pinky, for a very detailed explanation. Of course, one thing we haven't touched upon tonight is David Sullivan. And of course, one of the consequences of lockdown is that the work that had been done by groups such as Ham Utd and the Independent Supporters Association was halted. There were protests leading up to lockdown. There would have been a series of further protests had we not been ordered to stay at home. And there are plans for those protests to resume. So that's going to be very interesting, I think, to see what happens. I guess it's quite possible that if the noises are already, the wrong noises are already coming out of the boardroom, aren't they? We know the usual subjects have been pointed to say that we're not going to have, I was going to say much of a transfer kitty. It looks like we're not going to have a transfer kitty at all unless we can sell first, which isn't a particularly good sign. So, you can just sort of see us going into the start of next season and those protests building up and happening again. And, you sort of wonder where does that leave us as a club next season, fighting the board are fighting on all fronts then once again, aren't they? It's not just fighting to rebuild the squad. They're fighting the supporters, and it's not a healthy situation all round. So I guess, as you say, they can do something to alleviate that by investing more funds into the club this summer. As you rightly said, the share issue raised 30 million. Why can't we do it again? There's no reason why we can't boost those. I know, as you said, Pinky, we're spending other people's money here, and it's a dead simple thing to do, to sit here and say, you've put 30 million in, you can put another 30 million in. But I guess it depends how much you want to solve the problem, and how much desire there really is to bring about success at West Ham United. One thing I wanted to look at, you referred to their decade in charge. And just had a quick look while you were talking there. I was just having a look at our record, and the 39 points we finished with this season. Rio, perhaps you want to have a little comment on this one, but it's the worst tally, our lowest tally since the year we were relegated under Avram Grant. That season, we ended up bottom of the Premier League. It was the Premier League then, wasn't it? Lewis, I know, is particularly keen to avoid referring to it as the Premiership. When one of our regulars regularly berates me for us referring to it as the Premiership when it isn't. But I think it was the Premier League by 2010. I think 2008, 2009 was the switchover. But anyway, Avram Grant, 33 points. And the following season, of course, we were in the Championship when Sam Allardyce accrued 86, which was a record at the time for us. First season back in the Premier League, 2012-13, 46 points, 40 the following season. And in 2014-15, which I believe was Slaven's first season, I think, we ended with
2015-16.
That was his first season, right? Okay, so Sam Allardyce's final season in the Premier League, thank you, Rio, we finished on 47. So 46, 40, 47, an average of around 43, 44 points. In Allardyce's reign. Slaven Bilic, of course, in that what we probably all generally refer to as the last really positive season at the club, 2015-16, the final season at the Bowling. We finished with 62 points, our largest haul since, going back to, as far as I can remember, actually in the Premier League. I think that might have been our record in the Premier League. 45 the following season when David Moyes came in and rescued us. Even last year, the season before last, 42 points, 2017-18. And last season under Pellegrini, we finished 9th with 52 points. This year, 39 points, our final total. It's not good, is it? If you're looking for, a kind of arc of improvement over the course of 10 years of the current administration, Rio, you're sort of looking for something a bit better than our lowest points tally in 10 years. Trying to bundle that all into one big question. Firstly, the protests. Do you think the protests are going to continue regardless of what happens this summer? Do you think that good investment or maybe further investment, as Pinky referred to, might stave that off? And what do you think about kind of the whole points tally? Where do we need to be looking at next season to have a respectable season? Going from 39 this season. So I appreciate that's 2 or 3 questions in one there, but kind of like your overall impressions on that.
Okay. Do I think the protest will continue? Most definitely.
Regardless of what happens?
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. We were promised so much at the start of the Golden Sullivan reign.
Yep.
And very little, if anything, has been delivered.
Mm-hmm.
The move was supposed to generate X amount of additional pounds, drive us onto the so-called next level. And the next level has been a little closer to the relegation zone than everyone really wants. What we've seen, and it's indicative of how poorly this club is run. We're getting more television money than ever. We're paying a peppercorn rent, so we've not got the overheads that many clubs have. Yet we can only invest allegedly once every 3 seasons. The other 2 seasons in between are normally papering over cracks. We all know that our chairman, both of them, come from an industry where image is everything. And that sums our club up. Our stadium, for one thing, looks brilliant on the TV. I mean, the aerial shots today, it looks absolutely lovely. You know, it's set in a picturesque park. Any person who's never set foot inside it would go, oh, what are they moaning about? That looks glorious. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
But the reality is you step foot in it and it's a mishmash of scaffolding and nonsense. Our training ground. I used to play cricket over Rush Green. And the facilities weren't particularly befitting of a Premier League football club in a multi-billion-pound industry. Let's put it that way. Yep. Now, they've obviously done some work to it. They've spent some money on it. But I can't see any real kind of concrete evidence that they've not done anything other than paper over cracks and just tidied it up to make it look good. And the same goes for the squad. We buy one kind of showpiece signing per summer. Mm-hmm. But for the large part, that's utilising the transfer fees that we should be investing elsewhere. We bought Haller. We needed another striker. We bought Anderson. Did we really need him? You know, we need investment all around the squad, not just in one show pony kind of area. Mm-hmm. And we just don't get the fundamentals right. You know, we recruit incredibly badly. We make knee-jerk decisions on giving players brand new, improved contracts when they've had a run of 4 or 5 good games. I mean, Arthur Masuaku is a case in point now. We bought him in. He's been largely unconvincing. He had a purple patch for about a month or two, and all of a sudden he's got a lucrative new contract sitting next to him. And where is he now? He's not really fit to warm the bench. He feels no real purpose. I think he must throw some decent shapes on the dance floor when the player's going for a night out. But apart from that, what does he contribute to the club?
Yeah.
Everything we do is fundamentally wrong. Everything's papering over the cracks. And I've said this time and time again. We're a multi-million-pound club in an industry where money is freely flowing through. Yet we're run like a corner shop. And it's not befitting for a club who gets 50-odd thousand supporters in through the gate every week, who gets X amount of money and exposure on national television, worldwide television. With other clubs, other teams' supporters look at us and laugh because they know how poorly we are run. And I just can't see the end in sight. I really can't. And you can point to other factors. The move was handled in the most atrocious way ever. And it set the support back 4 or 5 years. Can you imagine how many people we'd get through the gate and how that ground would be for the proper West Ham fans if we was any good? You know, we saw when we got to Wembley for the first time in God knows how long. We could have filled that on our own. This club is being underutilised in every single aspect. And they just can't see it. I mean, if we don't get proper investment this summer because, we spent our budget last year or the year before, whoever they're going to angle it, it's just a shocking state of affairs. We need proper ownership. We need a proper plan in place. We need restructuring from the top to the bottom. And I just can't see it under the current stewardship.
Okay, good stuff. I'm going to come to the comments section in a minute. We've got plenty of comments coming in on the YouTube chat. Rio will also take a look at the KUMB forum to see what's been said there. We're going to, hopefully, if we've got time, we're going to have to wrap it up fairly soon because I appreciate these guys have got lives to live and I can't claim them all day for the rest of the day anyway. But a couple of things I just want to discuss sort of before we do. Pinky, some really excellent points made by Rio there. The training ground is substandard. The stadium is substandard. Recruitment is badly handled. The move, of course, was badly handled. A whole list of things, of charges we can throw at the board. this kind of makes me wonder something. We talk about the managers. We talk about Sam Allardyce, Slaven Bilic. Well, we thought was going to be a good manager. Pellegrini came in. We thought he was going to be an experienced manager. This is a guy, of course, let's not forget, who 5 or 6 years ago took Manchester City to a Premier League title as an experienced guy. They've all failed. None of them have lasted more than 2 or 3 years. So I think my point is this. One question, I think, about David Moyes is, do we offer him a new contract? But the other point I'm kind of sort of thinking is, does it really matter who we've got in charge with a board that's got a consistently poor record in everything they do, from the handling of the club to the handling of the transfer policy and to the, you know, the recruitment of the manager and the training staff, etc. And are we basically just treading water until such time as we can get rid of the current owners until they sell to someone who's basically able to take the club forward?
Yeah, treading water and occasionally coming very close to drowning. I mean, that's where we are as a club.
Yeah.
I mean, just pick you up on something there where you said, you know, a number of the managers that they've all failed. I'd actually argue quite a number of them haven't failed. Mm-hmm. In the context of the environment in which they've had to operate.
Yep.
They could argue they've actually been a success because, you know, despite our captain saying the club isn't run like a circus anymore, well, I'm afraid it is. You know, we're not particularly good as a club at a number of things. And the league table doesn't lie. Let's start with that. Let's start with, you know, fact-based decisions.
Yeah, let's look at that. 39 points, the lowest points haul in 10 years since they first came in.
So in 10 years, in a competitive industry, their contribution as the owners of West Ham United Football Club have been to fund it and organise it to the extent it is now making, you know, winning 6 points more than it did under a season in which they had a manager who, by common consent, was very, very poor indeed, and a squad by common consent that was, you know, threadbare because of the financial difficulties we're in at the time.
Yeah.
If we apply the Gold and Sullivan definition of debt that they used on the day they bought West Ham United Football Club, which includes monies owed to other football clubs for players. So when they were talking about 110 million pounds of debt, they were including football creditors within it. Mm-hmm. We're now in more debt now as a football club than we were the day they bought us. Considerably more. I think it's about 40 or 50 million pounds more.
Yep.
We've sold our home in that time. You know, so I look at it, say 6 more points, a lot more debt. We no longer own our own home. The constant war with supporters. Let's call it what it is. Yeah. They're fighting a battle with the supporters. Mm-hmm. That's been going on now for a number of seasons. But if we go all the way back to when, you know, we called them out over the loyalty scheme, the 5-season ticket, you know, annual loyalty scheme, whereby if you had your season ticket for 5 years, mm-hmm. and they tried to renege on paying out on that and claim, oh, we didn't know anything about it. You know, what a load of tosh. And then years later, when we've challenged them on it in a face-to-face meeting, and we were told, Gold and Sullivan did not undertake any due diligence when they bought West Ham United Football Club.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Karen Brady's own words. Yep.
So she sat there and said that, and I'm, you know, by that stage, I'm just speechless. I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Yeah. But again, if we take her at face value, and that is true, well, what does that tell you about the competence of the people running the show and what their real motives are? And, you know, my big fear is this constant approach of we do just enough to stay in the division. And I posed a question on the forum earlier today. We didn't have enough money to buy a proper strike partner for Haller in the summer. We went for what was clearly the budget option of a jetty. Okay, so we've gone cheap when actually, and if cheap is £8 million, say it, would an extra 13 or 14 million pounds have allowed us to get a proper strike partner in for Haller at that time, last August? And had we actually spent the money last August, could the story of our season have been very different? Whether it was on a strike partner for Haller or a proper goalkeeper backup for Fabianski.
Yeah.
But no, we didn't. We didn't have the money, we're told. Yet, when the club are deep in the mire in January, 5 months later, we find the funds miraculously for Bowen. What if that money had been made available 6 months earlier to Pellegrini? We could have saved the Pellegrini payoff money, whatever that turns out to be.
Mm-hmm.
We could have accrued a lot more points, and at £2.7 million for every league place, half a dozen places up the league. Well, then that player becomes self-financing. But no, the owners have this model whereby in a manager's reign, year one, they give them lots of money. Yeah, relatively speaking. Yep. Year two, it's kind of like maintenance money. You can replace players that have broken down, but nothing that's really going to fundamentally change the shape of your team. Mm-hmm. And in year three, you're getting shirt buttons, because in reality, we probably want to nudge you out the door after 3 years, because that's how we, as the board of directors, keep control. We're never going to let a mere manager, get powerful enough where actually he can start dictating to the board of directors. And that's the problem with the Sullivan and Gold model, is they want to keep total control, but actually they haven't got enough money to do so. I can assure you, Sheikh Mansour's in total control at Manchester City. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he's signing the checks. And when Pep Guardiola says, well, I want a new player, well, okay, he might get the money. That's because they believe and trust in what Guardiola's doing. Yeah, but there's no way that Guardiola is dictating to Sheikh Mansour. And it doesn't matter how many trophies he wins. The chairman there, or the boss, or the owner of that club, keeps control because they've got the money. And unfortunately, Mr. Sullivan, he just doesn't have enough money to compete in this league. And, being able to buy me out of his back pocket isn't the point. It's actually looking at the clubs above us. Liverpool, with vastly more resources than we're ever going to have. Manchester City, ditto. Manchester United, ditto. Chelsea, ditto. Even Leicester City, the Thai family that still ultimately owns the club.
Yeah.
Wealthy family. Yep. Tottenham Hotspur, you can say, okay, Joe Lewis isn't going to spend his money willy-nilly. But one thing's for sure, they're never going to be in the bottom six. It's just not going to happen. Even Wolverhampton Wanderers, allegedly billionaire owners. Arsenal. So you start looking and going, who are we going to go past? Oh, we've got Crystal Palace in our sights, have we? That's what we gave up our home of 100 years for, is it? So we can hunt down Crystal Palace. That's what we're trying to achieve, is it? And ultimately, I think, to go back to the question you asked, Rio, on the protests.
Yes.
The supporters, we gave up everything when we moved home. Everything. Many of us have been going over there for many, many years, and we liked it. You can say, oh, it was a bit this, it was a bit that, and people make disparaging comments about the neighbourhood. There was nothing wrong with the neighbourhood. Good people living in and around there. There was nothing much wrong with the ground. 3/4 of it had been rebuilt in the previous 20 years.
Yep.
So it was a fit for purpose football stadium. We were told that to progress as a football club, we had to move. It wasn't, the best option is to move. It was, we had to move. And here we are, 4 years in at the new home, 39 points. And the manager seemingly scrambling around for transfer funds again. And I'm sorry, the game's up. So for me, are the protests going to continue? They're bound to, because is this what, is this our dream? To sit in a Meccano built stadium watching a a spine of a team that's past the age of 30, getting knocked out of cup competitions in the early rounds, season after season. And please don't anyone bore me to death with stories about cheap tickets. £2,500 I paid for my seat in the London Stadium. Count it. 2.5 grand. And the view is worse than I had at the Bowling Ground. So don't tell me it's cheap tickets. Don't tell me it's a better match day experience. Don't tell me we're seeing better players. Because we haven't had a season in Stratford anything like the final one at the Bowling Ground. So every year this goes by, the justification for the move gets weaker and weaker, and the calls for a change in ownership are going to grow stronger. And there's only one thing that can stop this. David Sullivan, you either invest in West Ham United Football Club and put real money into getting a realistic transfer pot for the manager, a proper training ground for the players to do their daily work in, or you divest of West Ham United Football Club and you sell at a realistic price. Because ultimately, if we were pricing the club right now, Newcastle, has that deal been done yet? I think they were trying to get 250 million for it, or maybe 300.
Yeah.
The only club in the city, 50,000 that would turn up and watch paint dry because there is nothing else to do in Newcastle. Yeah. And they can't get that money for that club. If you look at West Ham United, if you want to invest in a London club, well, you'd prefer Arsenal, wouldn't you? Or Chelsea, yeah, or Tottenham. We're some way down the list, yeah. How much does Mr. Sullivan really think the club is worth?
Yep.
Years ago, we were getting told, we'd, turned down 650 million from Red Bull or whoever it was, yeah. What a load of nonsense. We've got 33-year-old Mark Noble as captain, 30-year-old Aaron Cresswell having played 33 matches this season, 32-year-old Angelo Ogbonna, playing the vast majority of games this season. Robert Snodgrass, the wrong side of 30. We have not got a valuable squad other than Declan Rice, possibly Issa Diop, and if we could get someone to take him off our hands, Sebastian Haller. That's about the squad nuggets, yeah. And you come to the point where you say, why, if you can only get, let's say, for those three, 100 million, how much would you give for West Ham United?
Mm-hmm.
Because the assets, it's only the squad because we don't own the stadium. Yeah. Why would anyone pay much more than that for West Ham United? Yeah. And this is where we're in the classic trap. The chairman can't get the fee that he clearly wants when selling the club because he's got a deluded idea as to what it's worth. And he hasn't got the money or won't put in the money to invest to make it a more valuable proposition for someone to buy. And given those two sort of competing forces, I can't see anything other than continuing protests because the chairman either needs to put up or sell up. Mm-hmm. It's one of the two. We can't carry on as we are season after season. We simply can't.
No. 10 years, of course, now under the current regime, and the relations between the fans and the board is possibly worse than it's ever been. I've just been actually taking a look while we were chatting there at the results for the last 4 seasons, and it works out that our average points haul since moving to Stratford, so we've been there 4 seasons now, and we've averaged 44.5 points per season. Just take that in for a minute. This is, as Pinky says, this is after we were told that we needed to move to this stadium in order to become competitive, in order to not necessarily qualify for the Champions League, but to provide a team that could challenge those clubs that are, and maybe seek European competition every year. So we're talking top 7. 44.5 points per season this year would have placed us just above Newcastle, promoted recently, who were in 13th place. We'd finished below Everton. who are stuck at a 35,000 capacity Goodison. It would have been below Southampton by 4 or 5 points with a 30,000 capacity stadium. We would have been somewhere around 10 points behind Burnley, who play at a 25,000 capacity stadium, and around the same number of points below Sheffield United, who have a similar size stadium and were playing in the Championship last year. So I guess when you take all that into account and you look at all that, it's no surprise whatsoever to see why the fans are upset, why the fans are unhappy with the move. Because the board have probably made their own bed here, haven't they? By promising too much. This is what David Moyes said. Promise more than we haven't delivered what we promised. They've promised the world and they've delivered nothing. A stadium not fit for purpose. A team quite often not fit for purpose. And everything else that goes with it. Recruitment, as Rio referred to, the training ground. We spent £4 million, I think it was, Rio, on the training ground at Rush Green, and made a big thing about spending that when you've got people like Leicester spending around £100 million on their training complex. It's, for want of a better word, it's laughable when you look at it. And I think Pinky makes some incredibly valid points. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's a question of spend up or bugger off, basically, because the fans have had enough. And the protests we've seen begin earlier this year, I absolutely agree with the guys. I don't see them going away. And it's going to be a very, very tricky season for West Ham. Anyway, interesting discussion. Pinky, go on quickly before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps David Sullivan's single greatest bit of luck has been the COVID crisis. Because one thing's for sure, the relationship between a very large section of the support and the board are at a very low point. And with no fans at games, well, you don't have to put up with pesky supporters, do you? You can just, it's just a TV audience. But let's not kid ourselves. Those protests that were going on back in, February and very early March, there weren't a couple of hundred people there. It wasn't even a couple of thousand. It was many, many thousands of supporters. Yeah, so I really hope the board don't fall into the trap of thinking it's just a few of the old guard riding around before they shuffle off to their old people's homes. Yeah, there was a good cross section of supporters there, and thousands of them.
Yeah.
And so this isn't something that is going to go away unless, as I say, the chairman recognises the reality of this board has failed to deliver on their promises. It wasn't what we were demanding.
Yeah.
We were happy where we were. They haven't delivered on what they promised. And maybe the chairman, maybe he could find that 100 million down the back of the sofa. Maybe he could put in 100 million. Maybe Mr. Gold could put in 20 million. Maybe Mr. Tripp Smith could put in 10 million. And then suddenly you can turn around to a Declan Rice and say, no, we're not going to sell you. Because do you know what we're going to do? We're going to go to Chelsea and we're going to bid for Mason Mount so he can come and play here. Yeah. We're going to go to Chelsea and bid for their players. And we're going to go to Arsenal and bid for their players. How much longer are we going to have to put up with us only being the selling club of the London clubs other than Crystal Palace? I mean, come on. If that's the benchmark, let's give up now. Yeah. But when are we actually going to compete with Arsenal, with Tottenham, with Chelsea? What, because we're paying the money for the tickets.
Yes.
We're paying top dollar for the tickets, and we are paying to watch the game in an awful, awful football stadium, because it isn't a football stadium. Mm-hmm. So our part of the bargain we're keeping. The chairman, he has to have a look at himself and say, am I keeping my part of the bargain? So either he puts money in, allows the manager to have a proper fund, or sells up and goes. Because if he doesn't, those protests, it's not hundreds of people, it's thousands.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, when I stood on the mount and spoke at that first protest, there was a couple of thousand there. But even then, between that and the next protest, when we marched along the Greenway,
yeah,
it mushroomed, didn't it? I mean, it went from a couple of thousand to, I mean, Ham Utd were putting out figures around 8,500, and that was in a matter of weeks. So I think you're absolutely right. I think COVID-19 was incredibly kind to David Sullivan, because I think it would have been more, and it would have been persistent as well. But we would, of course, we wait to see what happens. I mean, I guess they're going to come back.
Put that 8,500 in context. The opening few games of, 85, 86, we were only getting 15,000 at matches. So effectively, you're talking about, if they think it is just the old guard, that would have been nearly half our support from our best ever league season.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people to turn up and protest. And it's not a figment of Hammers United imagination. Yeah. Those people were there, and being no doubt, they will be back at those protests, because at the end of the day, they've been at West Ham United a lot longer than this current board of director has. Let's not kid ourselves. And I don't think there's many of them who realistically think that Mr. Sullivan is going to hang around forever. He wants his price, and then he'll scoot out the door. And for my money, he either makes that decision now, or he's got to invest heavily in the club, because this can't go on. It just cannot go on.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Interesting debate. We could be here forever, couldn't we? Talking about this one, and we have spent an awful lot of time talking about it on the forum in recent months and years. But I'm just going to dive in quickly just to see a few comments on the chat. JPT says it could have been worse. We could have gone down. It actually could have been worse. We could have gone down. There's no question about it. I think that's the whole point, isn't it, JPT, that we shouldn't be in this situation. We were sold a pup, and we expected more. I don't think any of us were expecting to be challenging for the Champions League, but we certainly weren't expecting, after 4 years at Stratford, to be fighting relegation each and every season. Chris Dorby says Everton have spent £500 million on players, and he adds the club is worth £200 million at the very most. That's double your money, GNS, take it. Just having a quick flick through. Lots of comments. Pierino Schiavone says, at least we've got our beautiful memories of the bowling, winning cups, loyal players, etc., etc. The kids won't experience that. They'll see a bunch of mercenaries from a distance, and that's about it. And I think that's one of the hardest things as a supporter, because I grew up in an era personally, and we're all of a similar age, when West Ham were challenging. My first 2 years as a West Ham fan, we won the FA Cup. We got to the Cup Winners' Cup final. Not so many years later, we won another FA Cup, got to a League Cup final and held the European champions, took them to a replay. It was heady times as West Ham fans. And the kids since then, I say kids, but anyone under 30, 35 really, haven't really ever seen us win anything. I mean, unless you count the Intertoto Cup. And, I really feel for those people, those fans that have been starved of not even success, but just some decent, a decent season or two. We've not really had an awful lot to cheer. Soulboy, ownership level, they've proven unsuccessful. Tacky, cheap are words that come to mind. The trickle-down effect is what we see on the pitch. And there's plenty of other comments along those lines. Steve Spraggs, Cockney Hammer, says they have sold our soul. Steve Spraggs referring to Rio, some points you made earlier. Good points, Rio. Our fans deserve so much better. Sadly, it will never change. It's what it is, unfortunately. Lots of... I suppose we should be happy in a way. We should be kind of celebrating the fact that we have avoided relegation, but we know that West Ham United Football Club could be so much more. I'd hate, we don't want to be those supporters that sort of sit here and say we deserve more. I think that's sort of best left to fans of clubs like Arsenal and Tottenham. But it would be nice just to have our day in the sun, or a few days in the sun, and we're just not really getting those at the moment. As I say, a debate that we could go on and on and on about, but we have to move on to other things. And one thing I'd like to move on to now, Rio, my apologies for leaving you sitting in silence there for the last God knows how long. But we're going to come to you in a second, buddy. If you can just take us through the forum, just see what people are saying about the match in a minute. But first of all, before we do that, David Moyes has spoken to the people, and some comments from Moisey following this afternoon's 1-1 draw with Aston Villa that was enough to keep Villa in the Premier League. Moyes says, we didn't play as well today as we might have done, but I'm pleased with the players, their performances against Chelsea, getting a point at Manchester United. It's only praise for how well they've done. So Moisey wanting to accentuate the positives this afternoon, and why not? He's done a fabulous job in the last few weeks. Talking about next season, Moyes says some of the young players have shown what they are capable of. We have 5 or 6 talented boys around the team, so I'm looking forward to see how they go. Just very quickly, Rio, who do you think they are? Who do you think the 5 or 6 talented youngsters are he's referring to there?
Well, I'm presuming Diagana's going to be one of them.
Diagana, good shout. Yeah, coming back. Like a new signing, as they say.
Yeah, Connor Coventry, I presume, because he's been on the bench a couple of times. He's got a lot of kind of good reviews from his time in the under-23s.
Yeah, Ben Johnson, I guess.
Ben Johnson, I thought was my man in the match today.
Yeah,
playing on the wrong side to what he's used to. Mm-hmm. He acquitted himself incredibly well again. Then we're going to look through. I mean, I know there's a couple of rated youngsters. I mean, what's his name? Silva. He's been on the bench a few times.
Yeah, he's just never really been given a start. Has he not been trusted?
No, but he must be doing something right to get there, because there's a lot of players that nowhere near it. No one else.
Nathan Holland, do we think he's got a chance to shine? He's in the running, isn't he, for the Premier League 2 Player of the Year? Of course, he's received a nomination.
Yeah, I just don't know if the move. What was it? Oxford, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it's gone. It's gone okay, but he's not really shone as much as he really should have done.
Yeah,
I know we've got Cardoso.
Yeah, do you think he's? I mean, we haven't really seen a lot of him, as we another player that came in last year. He was spoken quite highly of, 18 years old when he came in, but has not represented the first team, or has he might have made one appearance?
He's been on the bench a couple of times, never actually made his debut.
He has come on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of players that get talked about, but never make that push through. So I'll be interested to see where Moyes is heading with this. I think, obviously, Diagana is the standout.
Yeah.
Can Connor Coventry actually force his way past what is now a pretty strong position for us? He's got Soucek, Rice, Fornells, Noble in front of him. It's going to take a big step for that.
Do we think
maybe other areas?
Sorry, I was just going to say, do we think maybe he's looking at Josh Cullen, perhaps, having had his season in the Championship, or do you think that's maybe a little bit too much of an ask for Josh?
I think he's a great Championship player, but judging by all the reviews we're getting from him, that could be his level. If he'd wanted to make the breakthrough for us, I think it would have come a lot earlier. So I think we're looking at other areas where potential youngsters are going to come through. Okay. I'm just not convinced that I know who they are at the moment, because nothing's really standing out.
Yeah. Well, there's a few there, though. I mean, there's a few. We've got choices. There's some good options in various areas. And I suppose if we're looking for a squad next season, as opposed to, necessarily first team starters, maybe Diagana can force his way into the first team next year in place of someone like Anderson Yarmolenko as a natural winger. He's certainly been fabulous in the Championship this year for West Brom, and that move has definitely worked out. But just going back to the other things Moyes has said, talking about squad rotation, bringing players in and investing this summer. He says the club has spent a lot of money, but we will try and add to it if we can. If not, we will go with the players we have got. Antonio is a great example of that. Pinky, that's kind of ringing alarm bells for me a little bit there.
Yeah, okay. Let me put the most positive spin on it I can. That's the manager backing his talents, to say you can't blame me for the first half of the season, because that's where we clearly dropped all the points and we'll be much better next year. Come on. I mean, that's too optimistic a spin. The reality is we've had this, in terms of players that have made it onto the pitch, we've had the second oldest team in the top flight this season. Only Burnley have had an older team on the pitch than us.
Yeah.
Okay? We know that older players have a tendency to get injured more regularly and take longer to recover and repair. So we know that. So the punishing pace of the Premier League hurts older players generally. So if what the manager is saying is, I'll eke another season out of Dad's army, Noble, Snodgrass, Ogbonna, yeah, and to some extent Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget, Antonio's games this season have been limited because he was injured for a good part of it.
Yep.
So what makes us think that he isn't going to be injured for a good part of next season as well? So for my money, if we're saying go with what we've got, yeah, it might be, the manager basically saying the price I'm going to pay to hang on to Declan Rice is, well, there's no money available. And I kind of get that. But actually, the other side of the coin, and without going over and over it,
mm-hmm.
show me the law that says the owner cannot put money in.
Yeah.
If we're short of funds, put some more money in. And I'm just looking at the clubs there, and maybe they're looking at going, we could easily move up 5 places by a couple of victories. Let's set 50 points as our target.
Yeah.
And say that's what we're going to do and call that success. Unfortunately, it's not success.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to know what failure is accepting mid-table mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
That's failure. That's when a manager has failed, when he starts to think that finishing mid-table is success within itself. It isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't. The whole point of this is to try and win things. Try and win a trophy.
But is it? But the question is it now? I mean, it always used to be the case, but is it not the case now, Pinky, that, the ambition for most clubs is just to be in that Premier League, just to be part of it? Because you can't win things these days, can you? I mean, look how difficult, even with the FA Cup, how many teams outside the established top 5 or 6, win it these days?
Well, the only certainty is if you don't try, you won't.
Of course.
That's the certainty. And people hate me for saying it. I'll chuck Leicester City in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they'll say, yeah, once in a million. Okay, I'll chuck Wolverhampton Wanderers in there, who have had 2 incredibly grueling seasons now.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been playing virtually non-stop for 2 years. Yeah. And they're finished in 7th position, and we don't hear negative stories about that football club. We're seeing Burnley Football Club on a vastly more limited resources than we should have. Well, there you go. Sean Dyche. Let's not kid ourselves. We got a bit schooled when they turned up recently. Yeah, there he is. Sergeant Major Dyche, 54 points on the board, and I've spent close to nothing. And by the way, we've got a lovely training ground. Southampton get done 9 by Leicester City, mm-hmm. and still end up with a better goal difference than West Ham United. So the scale of rebuild that's needed can't be overstated. And to hear the manager basically saying, I've got to sell before I buy. Well, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing the details of what you're going to do with season tickets for next year, because I know the ICES have been talking to the club about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just see what those details are, how many games I would get in to see if they go with this mooted 40% attendance that whispers are coming out of. So for us, 25,000. Do you think they could actually sell 25,000 season tickets on the back of we're not spending any money? I've actually got my doubts. We could be a club that's got a restricted capacity that we can't sell out, because ultimately supporters will go, do you know what? No, No, I'll miss a season now, because if I'm just going to be watching Dad's Army and a couple of youngsters, is that enough? And in really what I'm saying here is, the manager, of course, he's got to play the political game with the chairman. He can't just come out and say, Mr. Sullivan, you've got to be kidding, pal. Give me 100 million quid. The manager's got to be a lot more subtle, and he's got to toe the party line, and that's fine. But it is very worrying from a supporter's perspective that the manager is having to say those things, because I'm not hearing Frank Lampard say that.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing Ole Gunnar Solskjaer say that. Jurgen Klopp's not saying that. Yeah. Sorry, but why is it just West Ham United's manager saying it again?
Yeah.
What, because we spent money 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Interesting. I mean, as you say, as always, you read between the lines, really, don't you, on most of these comments, and Pinky just doing a very good job of doing exactly that. On Declan Rice, Rio, he was asked about Declan Rice. And again, this is one where you can, I think, read more into what he didn't say than what he did say. Asked sort of about his future, Moyes replied, Declan will be back for pre-season with us in 3 weeks. That was his answer.
Oh, it's a start, isn't it? At least he's going to get a pre-season out of him. It doesn't instill confidence, though, does it, really, long term?
No, it's the same thing, isn't it? It all ties in really with the whole, what we were just discussing there about, about the general transfer policy. It doesn't really, does it? But
no, it's sending out a lot of the wrong messages rather than the positive messages. If I was Mrs. Brady, Mr. Gold and Mr. Sullivan, I'd look at their customer retention figures, because we are customers now and not supporters. I'd like them to take a look at the data and see how many of the more established fans are now no longer going, and how many season tickets have been sold over the last few years to newer fans who probably won't have the same amount of loyalty down the line. Yeah. And if that figure's dwindling, they've got to look at that. They've got to look at that in a serious way.
Yeah, and I guess we also hope that they do keep that information now, because I remember being at a meeting with you not so many years ago, I think it was at the bowling ground, where we were informed that they didn't keep that information beyond about 5 or 6 seasons. So let's hope they've got that in order a bit more now.
Imagine your Declan Rice.
Yeah.
Imagine your Declan Rice. Okay. You've just finished a pretty grueling season. It's gone on basically for a year. Yeah. And your manager, who has got the job next year, basically said, if we can get some players in, that'll be great, but we're not banking on it. Yeah. So you've just finished in 16th place, 39 points. And the player that you used to, play football with has just finished in 4th place on 66 points and is looking forward to the Champions League next season.
Yep.
How do you feel if you're Declan Rice?
Yep, very good point.
The manager has just said he'll be back for pre-season training in 3 weeks. Do you know what? Declan Rice might just be there going, guess again, pal. Yeah, because if that is the extent of West Ham United's ambition, why would I want to be? I mean, not being funny, why would Mark Noble come back for another season? Because you go, what, another season of chasing the tail around the park to finish 4th, 5th bottom?
Yeah.
And so it's very, very worrying that the manager is making those statements. And of course, it's not the manager's fault. We know where the fault lies. And the troubling thing is here, what exactly is the extent of the club's debt? How much do we really owe other clubs now? Remember, the financial statements that we get to see, you know, they're ancient history now.
Yeah.
We've actually bought Haller since the last published accounts. I just wonder how deep the hole is that West Ham United are in, that we're actually in this position.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that obviously we've had to, you know, the board have put £30 million in recent weeks. We've got David Moyes saying now that he might have to go into next season with the squad he finished this one with. Doesn't really give us any confidence that things are well financially at the club, that's for sure. But we shall, of course, wait and see what happens. But it certainly doesn't look good. David Moyes, more comments today. Talking about pre-season, he says, we've got our dates in place, players' return dates and all that. We're waiting for the final sign-off. We're presuming that there won't be any trips to places like Spain in the next few weeks. I'm not sure what the situation is like in Sweden, but maybe it'll be a case of we're going to the more traditional sort of pre-season venues once again, like Southend, Peterborough, Norwich. Now they're back in the Championship. Who knows? Even a trip to Ireland or even Scotland again, as we've done many times in the past. Talking about the end to this season, David Moyes, speaking after the match, said, this season has been a lot tougher than the last time I was at the club. West Ham will always have good expectation. It's a well-supported club. The expectation is there because there was a lot of money spent on players, but you tend to finish where you deserve to be. Interesting one. Rio, do you think West Ham finish where they deserve to be this season?
Ultimately, the league table doesn't lie, does it? So, yeah, strictly speaking, we've been fortunate to escape the drop. It's only because there have been three teams far worse than us.
Yeah.
Rather than us being better than him. Now, we took a lot of time to recover. Once, obviously, the Roberto incident, our players showed absolutely no heart, no passion, no real commitment for 3 or 4 months. And we suffered a massive hangover from that. Mm-hmm. David's come in, he steadied the ship. Like I said before, the 2 acquisitions in Bowen and Souček have been a key role in steadying us and getting us back on track. But I think we're incredibly fortunate. As Pinky said, where was the money when we needed it in the summer? We could have avoided a lot of this nonsense. They've found the money down the back of the sofa again, as they often do when the chips are down. Yep, it's rather out of necessity rather than intent, really. And yeah, we're just lucky that we've survived.
Yeah, very much a case of being reactive rather than proactive, as has often been the case, especially over the course of the last 10 years. Finally, from his press conference today, Moyes talking about the short turnaround between now and the beginning of the next season, which, of course, begins on the 12th of September. He says, we've seen real encouragement, but I think the players need a break. They need to reflect and come back. I want high standards. Nothing really to argue with there. And finally, talking about the owners and a debrief following the culmination of the 2019-20 campaign, Moyes says, I don't think that will happen in the coming weeks, but I don't think the market will play out that way. I'm not quite sure what he's referring to there, but with all the things going on with the transfer market, it often goes to the last minute. It certainly goes to the last minute at West Ham United. And we, of course, we know David Sullivan, of course, should I say, loves a bargain day transfer on the very last day of the season. I remember being in Spain 4 or 5 years ago on the final day of the summer transfer window, and I think we made 6 or 7 signings on the last day. He does love to push one through. So it looks like we're in for a bit of that again this year. But ultimately, we shall see what happens in the coming weeks. It is a 6 or 7 week transfer window this year. Very, very, very short one. And obviously a small pre-season. But West Ham has survived this year. It's not been great. We've been over loads of points in the last however long it is since the game finished, an hour and a half. I've kind of lost track now. Rio, before we sign off for the night, Do you want to dip into the forum, something we were going to do about an hour ago, and just see what the guys are saying about the team saying there on the match thread about today's game, which of course finished West Ham United 1, Aston Villa 1.
Yep, understandably, there's not a lot of love flying around. The words lacklustre have been used on a regular basis.
Yep.
There's been a couple of disgustings. There's a lot of criticism of Fabianski's role in Villa's goal. Fredericks as well, as we discussed. Just looking, one of the comments that really stood out for me was by a user called Three Dicks, which I presume is in honour of our former left-back and not our owners. And he said, our lot didn't even give it a go. Anytime we got near the box, we turned around and came back as if there was some agreement in place. Villa defended in numbers, but there were numerous times we could have played forwards and instead went backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps an overly relaxed performance from our lot. No result made no odds to us, but they are professional footballers and the objective should be win regardless, not just show up and make the numbers. Not that anyone played badly per se, just uninspiring. And that is probably the general gist of what everyone has come out with.
Yeah.
Hugh Jargon said, disappointing. Fab diving out the way of the ball will haunt Bournemouth for years to come. Also, his catchphrase, pardon, at the end of it, but I won't go into that. That is the general consensus, like lacklustre. There's not a lot of love flying about. It's going to be a bit of a job moderating later on.
Yeah. On that, Rio, what do you think? I mean, we saw David Moyes say before the game that even though we're safe now, we're going to be doing our best to get the points and take as much as we can in terms of prize money at the end of the season. But is it the case that because it's been such a difficult season for the club, because we've been fighting relegation essentially since New Year, since Christmas perhaps, when Pellegrini went, do you think it's only natural that psychologically we've taken our, well, not just psychologically, but physically as well, we've taken our foot off the gas today a little bit, and because we are now safe, there is nothing more to fight for. The job is done, and that's why we ended up putting in such a, to use the phrase you coined there, lacklustre performance this afternoon.
Yeah, I think that plays a key role. But like we said, Villa really had to come and win to come preserve their status.
Yeah,
they didn't offer an awful lot, did they? Mm-hmm. As has been mentioned on the forum as well, they're an incredibly niggly side. They set up to kind of come for the point, which they got. We look tired. We've utilised a really small amount of our squad in the last few weeks, haven't we? I think the last 10 games since the restart, we've used probably, I think, 14, 15 maximum.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of tired minds, tired legs, not a lot of will from either side, to be honest. I think that shone through immensely today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rio. Pinky, final word for this afternoon, just really on the same thing. Do you think it was a bit of an ask really to expect West Ham to go out there and put in a performance on the final day of the season, knowing that we've achieved what we set out to do a few weeks ago when Project Restart began and avoided relegation?
Yeah. I mean, as much as we all might sit there and say, oh, they're professionals, they should do this, they should do that.
Yeah,
they're human beings first and foremost. And it's been an incredibly long season. And whilst people say, well, they had 3 months off. Yeah, it's 3 months at home, but it isn't 3 months where you're on your holidays or all the rest of it. And they'll have had stresses in their domestic lives, same as the rest of us. Aaron Cresswell, I know, was very concerned about the restart and things like that. So, they are human. I'll forgive them an off day today because they'd done what they needed to do, so they didn't have to do it today. Yeah. So they'd put in enough hard work just to make sure that we didn't have a final day dramas. So I've got no issues with today. Looking ahead and the very quick turnaround that we've got now between now and the start of next season. Our 4 most selected players this year, 3 of them have been over the age of 30. In Ogbonna, Noble and Cresswell. Okay. And they, after basically what's amounted to an 11-month season, are now going to go into what could be another 11-month season, if any of them have international ambitions and all the rest of it. And, their legs aren't going to last. And this idea that is already in the chairman's head, clearly, that, well, we'll go with what we've got because, getting deals done is very difficult and there's much money and blah, blah, blah. Those players, it's a hell of a risk, thinking they're going to get us over the line another season. Mm-hmm. And so today, I'm not bothered about.
Yep.
Next season, I'm deeply worried already. And I'm a huge fan of Mark Noble, but the bloke's 33 and he's given everything for the club already.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about, we'll get players in if we can. He must be looking at that going, you've got to be kidding. You don't want 30 odd games out of me again next year as well, do you? And so it goes on, and it's kind of like, where if people think today's bad, God help us come November when the players start to flag again, if there's no reinforcements brought in. So for me, today they get a pass. Enjoy your fortnight off, lads. Well done, you've kept us up. But in all honesty, they need some help, and they need some help from players that can contribute more than Jack Wilshere's 4 games, Ajetti's 3 games, and so it goes on. We're milking the same cows too often, and eventually the milk's going to run dry.
Thank you, Pinky. Thank you, Rio. And thank you to everybody who's joined us again for today's Eyes Up Mother Brown. It's been despite the situation we've been in, I think I can speak on behalf of everybody in the KUMB team that's participated in these Eyes Up Mother Brown shows over the course of the last few weeks. 9 in total since we came back. And we've managed to see a few goals. We didn't see a goal for the first 2 or 3 games. We was getting quite worried we might never see one. But we did go and see a few goals in the end. It's been a really enjoyable experience. And depending on what happens next season, Pinky has obviously referred to the fact that they're talking about 40% capacity at some Premier League grounds from October. We'll see how that pans out. However, somebody has asked, or a few people have asked, whether we intend to continue to do this next season. And I'm happy to say that, yes, we are going to consider it, depending on who's available, what numbers are available, and, how it all plays out with the government. But, thank you to everyone who's left some really nice comments about these shows. Thank you to people like Chris Dalby, for example. Chris says, I'm going to miss these Eyes Up Mother Browns for the next 6 weeks. I've really enjoyed these interactions. Top work, gentlemen. Chris, it's for you guys that we do it. We love doing it, but it's wonderful to get your feedback. We're all West Ham fans. We're all in the same boat after all. And, as I say, I think I can speak on behalf of the whole team to say that it's been a thoroughly enjoyable experience. So we'll see what comes next season, but we may well be back. We shall see. It has, of course, today finished West Ham United 1, Aston Villa 1. West Ham's Premier League status was assured in midweek at Manchester United. Today, it's Aston Villa who were left celebrating in Stratford. Commiserations to supporters of Bournemouth and Watford, who are going to be playing in the Championship next season as a result. West Ham end the season in 16th place. We fall a place today because of Brighton's win at Burnley, but it could have been far, far worse. And I think we all know that. The summer's nearly over, but the next few weeks are going to be a time for reflection, not only for the supporters, the players, but also those who run the club. They know what lies ahead if they don't invest. We've all seen it coming. We've escaped this year. We may not escape next year, as Pinky says, if nothing is done. So we wait to see how it all pans out. For now, that is it. We shall be back with a podcast again sometime in the next few days. I'll let you know on the KUMB forum when that's going to be. But that will be another episode of the Mod Pod. But for today and for now, thank you on behalf of all of us for joining us. It's been great to have you on the feed and also reading your comments on the match thread on Knees Up Mother Brown. We shall, of course, see you all again soon. So it's goodbye from me and goodbye from the Pink Palermo.
Cheerio. Yeah.
And also, Rio, thank you again. As always, goodbye from you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we shall see you all again very soon. Until then, of course, come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons.